Hello, and welcome to the Virginia Department of Education's webinar on the instructional practices for students with significant cognitive disabilities. My name is Leah Mason, and I am the alternate assessment specialist here in the Office of Student Assessment for the Virginia Department of Education. For our students with significant cognitive disabilities, we have three expectations that must align according to instruction. So to meet all of the academic expectations, our classrooms for these students and for this population must reflect three important areas: content, which is the academic standards; the teaching of the content, the instruction in which these students will receive; and the evaluation of that instruction, which is the assessment. Each of these elements are interrelated and must work closely together in order to reinforce each other. The instruction for the students with this population are through the Virginia Centralized Standards of Learning, known as the VSALs. The VSALs are what we call the academic content standards for reading, mathematics, and science. They were derived from the SOL and reduced in depth, breadth, and complexity. They were developed by Virginia Department of Education staff in partnership with the Behavioral Research and Teaching, known as BRT, at the University of Oregon, along with collaboration with Virginia special education teachers from approximately 27 school divisions. The VSALs for reading and math are available in grades 3 through 8 in high school. The VSALs for science are available in grades 5, 8 in high school. The grade 5 VSALs for science are taught in grade 4 and 5, and the grade 8 VSALs for science are taught in grades 6, 7, and 8. You can find the VSALs on the webpage, the VAT webpage for the Virginia Department of Education's website. So our purpose today is to provide you with some instructional practices used by Virginia teachers of those with the students with significant cognitive disabilities. And so we are going to address three areas today: the use of the Applied Studies Curriculum Map done by Richmond City Public Schools, the use of cross-curricular materials, classroom economy, collaborations with general education teachers, a rolling snack gift card done by Nottoway County Public Schools, and building communication and life skills done by Virginia Beach City Public Schools. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our presenters. We have Amanda Daly, who is an intensive support mentor teacher for Richmond City Public Schools; Amanda Atkinson, who is a special education coordinator for Nottoway County Schools; Lauren Marino, who's a high school special education teacher from Nottoway County Public Schools; and Elizabeth Mall, who's an elementary special education teacher from Virginia Beach Public Schools. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda and allow Amanda Daly, who is our intensive support mentor teacher from Richmond Public Schools, to share about what their instructional practices are and how this can benefit you all, even in your instructional practices in your classrooms. Amanda?
Thank you, Leah. Like Leah said, I am an intensive support mentor teacher with Richmond City Public Schools. We are a fairly larger district, so we have quite a few preschool centers. We have 25 elementary schools, 7 middle, 5 high schools, and then 3 specialty schools. And so our intensive support program encompasses our instruction for our deaf and hard of hearing classes. We also have our blind and visually impaired students, our students with complex medical needs, and then those with significant cognitive disabilities and significantly impacted with autism. So a very large umbrella of students. And our support looks like going into different classrooms and supporting with classroom management, instruction towards VSALs, curriculum access, and any other specific needs related to our classrooms. Next, please, Leah. So within Richmond City, we use the Applied Studies Curriculum Map as a supplement to kind of enhance our instruction on the VSAL standards. So the intention is to provide our students with some opportunities for some real life application of the standards or the content within the VSALs. to kind of boost that better understanding and over time get a better outcome for those post-secondary things happening after high school. So this curriculum map includes English, math, social studies, and science, as well as independent living and employment domains, and it connects exactly along with the VSOL standards and the instruction that goes across the grade levels. So for this first section of the presentation, we're going to review this resource and how it connects to the VSOL instruction, and then we'll kind of go over some specific examples of how we use that within RPS. Next. So the goal of the Applied Studies Curriculum Map really aligns with the mission of VDOE. So this little blurb just kind of has the overall mission as far as providing children with disabilities the knowledge and skills they need to live, learn, work, and participate within communities of their choice with the maximum amount of independence as possible. So VDOE has taken that mission in mind and developed an applied studies curriculum map based on some national research analysis and some stakeholder input. And the goal is for that to meet those needs of those students with disabilities, but make it more effective and align with that instruction. Next. So when we're looking at the purpose of this map, it was really developed to help give some statewide guidance for IEP teams to develop those goals and those objectives related to their IEPs. It also improves those communication skills and gives you a better idea of how to commonly plan for K through 12 with some of those skills they're going to need for post-secondary outcomes. And it also promotes the incorporation of those evidence-based practices and some of the predictors we look at for student programs. Just to point out that the goal really is to boost that stronger post-secondary outcome, and it's not intended to replace those VSOL standards. So it's really meant to enhance and boost that instruction and give kind of a guide of how we can apply those skills within the classroom to get that better outcome of the VSOLs. So on the next slide, we'll kind of look at how the structure of those applied studies curriculum map is and go into more detail of the skill levels. Next. So when we're looking at the structure of the curriculum map, all of our skills are set up very similarly to what we would typically see with the VSOLs. So at the beginning of the box there, you'll see the domain. So for this example, it's English, the ENG, which would correlate just like we see within the VSOLs, but it would be an R for reading. The middle piece where it says SSR is what we would call our competency. So for this example, it's a self-selected reading. When we're thinking about the VSOLs, that would be similar to that reporting category. So a typical reporting category would be demonstrating comprehension in fiction text. And then the number in the bullet corresponds to the level within the competency and the specific skill that we're looking at within that level. So we're going to go to the next slide and look at an example and talk through that piece of level and skill more. So on this slide, you can see an example of an English competency. So this is that self-selected reading piece for the skill. And each competency is broken into 4 different skill levels. So it's similar to the complexity continuum within the VSOL strands. So thinking about how we apply those specific skills within each different area to the VSOLs. So the complexity of skills at the lower end is that recognizing and recalling. So choosing a text to have read to them is one of those lower level skills. And then as you move towards the higher level skills, comparing and contrasting and using search engines and demonstrating an ability to generalize, that's more aligned to those higher level high school VSOL standards for reading. So again, going back to that mission of what the overall goal is for our kids is to get to those post-secondary outcomes and get that instruction they need. And this kind of aligns with getting those VSOL standards taught as well. Next slide. So where do we begin? As we're looking through the curriculum map, it's a very big guidance document. It's pretty thick. So in order to kind of help us kind of really tease out what we need from that document, the first 23 pages goes through a lot of different resources. So it'll go through what the purpose is, kind of like we discussed on some of the previous slides, as well as the criteria to receive an applied studies diploma, and the structure of what the curriculum map is. So what those domains and competencies and the levels are. It's also going to review how you could use it to support your IEP development and how some specific teaching strategies might boost those outcomes, as well as some of the predictors that we look at for our post-school success. And then there's a good chunk of it that's dedicated to some of those evidence-based practices that we use to support our students and how they get to those skills, as well as some information on how you can use this to report and measure your progress, which again can help with that IEP development and progress monitoring. Next. So thinking about how this tool can be used and what it looks like. So it's really meant to assess some instructional and skill gaps for kids and how those could relate to getting to those VSOL standard outcomes. So for example, if we think about some of our younger kids, there's some prerequisite skills that we need them to get in order to get to those 3rd, 4th, 5th grade VSOLs. And so what does that look like as far as instruction and what those are? But also, what are kids are coming to the table with already knowing? So then using that information as well as some student strengths and interests to kind of guide on what our work-based learning opportunities would look like. So we made a customized framework in-house on how we could go out on work-based learning and apply those skills that we needed at the secondary level. And then thinking about career exploration across all of the grade bands. So starting at the elementary level, addressing those skill gaps, and then building on that complexity continuum. And in RPS, keeping in mind, we were really trying to support and boost our post-secondary outcomes and then drive a change. So changing kind of the mindset of how we really address career exploration. So we use these resources to help us introduce career exploration at the elementary level. And that kind of helped us build some more work-based learning at the middle and high school level and connect those overlapping skills together so that we could enhance our students' learning and their outcomes toward those VSOL standards in more of an application-based method. Next. So specifically related to our elementary career exploration, we really developed a good framework for that last year. So focusing on that vertical transition of students from elementary all the way through to post-secondary life and determining those prerequisite skills that they needed to master those VSOLs at that current grade level. So how can we really take those VSOL skills and make them into an applicable job that they could focus on some work-based readiness skills as well? So we really looked at applied studies level 1 and 2 skills. So again, those lower on the complexity continuum skills, the identifying and understanding. And then by high school, we would be at those 3 and 4 skills of the analyzing and generalizing. Really important, we used our students' interests and our strengths so that we would have more engagement from them and then more opportunities to be able to extend. And we really collaborated with a variety of different entities and stakeholders. So building staff, related services, we had the families involved, just to really get the buy-in for our students to have that better outcome. And really focusing on that, taking our instruction, putting it into practice, and then them applying it so that we could have those stronger post-secondary outcomes. Next. So some of the ways we looked at formatting and our activities within our career exploration, again, focusing on that interest and that strength of the students. So we kind of planned for a variety of jobs. And then as we got started, we kind of narrowed in on using the library to kind of make a template almost of how we could really use this to hit a variety of different interests, as well as incorporating all those different VSOLs into all those jobs. So when using the variety of tools through the process, we thought about the VAP format and how that might support students in kind of seeing that across all different categories. So in this top picture, you'll see the students only had 3 choices to choose from. So again, just kind of making sure that it aligns with what they're going to see when it comes to instruction, as well as giving them a variety of opportunities and formats. So that top picture is an example of one of our video links for the students to really explore some different jobs that we were looking at putting into place. And so for this particular resource, the kids had links of videos and text related to the potential jobs that were available, and they were exploring them and then choosing if this job sounded interesting, if they were not interested, or they wanted to learn more. And this directly relates back to that VSOL of answering questions about a nonfiction text, because they were reading those texts related to the specific jobs and then kind of answering not only this question, but other questions during that instruction piece. The bottom picture is about them doing their job application. So at the end of the process, we had them actually apply for their job. Again, choosing from 3 different choices, similar to a VSOL or VAP format, but they had what time of day they wanted to work. And so that connects directly to a math VSOL standard for 4th grade, which would be telling time. In this particular example, they needed to recognize what time of day, morning or afternoon, as a prerequisite skill. So that would be a skill within that applied studies curriculum map that the students would need to meet. And so for our K1 kids, we did that by doing morning or afternoon. For our students that were a little bit higher level in that 3, 4, 5, then we would have had specific times that they could pick. Again, just aligning that VAP VSOL information into our career exploration and applied studies. Next. So we ended up really focusing and honing in on 10 different jobs within a school library, and they were all aligned to what our students' interests were based on our inventories. And we really focused in on some level 1 and 2 applied studies competency skills because we were at that elementary level. So thinking about those reading and math skills for elementary and how those aligned with the VSOL standards and the applied studies competency skills. So within our project, we used one elementary school, but we had 2 different classrooms, and they were K through 5 students. One was a variety of significantly cognitive impacted students, and the other was one of our hearing core classes, also significantly cognitively impacted, but a variety of other specific needs as far as having interpreters, mobility and orthopedic impairment needs, and deaf and hard of hearing teachers involved. So we really wanted to get a good baseline and collaboration across all of our continuum so that we could make sure that our resources and our instruction were really, really doing what we needed them to do. So on this slide, you can see some examples of the math VSOLs that we addressed. And we tried to make a variety of the standards incorporated or differentiated across the jobs based on what our students' grade levels were, but also what their skill gaps were. So for example, there were areas that were addressed in math at a variety of the jobs, and usually throughout the labeling of items or within some of those specific jobs. As we focused on 2 of the jobs through the next couple of slides, you'll see how we really made those connections and differentiated based on the grade levels. So we're going to focus on the book delivery job and the cleaning specialist and go through some of those examples on the next slide. So our book delivery person was responsible for a variety of different tasks within their job. So they had to organize the carts every day. They had to go to the classrooms and pick them up and drop them off for the next day. They were following a schedule to set up that they personally set up each day for what was coming next. And then they also had to remember, thinking of an elementary school, that classes change and rotate as they go to the library. So really following what that staff schedule looked like so that we could make sure we were getting our carts where they needed to be. The point of the carts was for the students in the general education classroom to put all their books to return to the library in. And then our kids would bring those books to the library. We had another job where they would scan and so on and so forth. So this was just one piece to that puzzle. So thinking about the VSOL standards, we hit a variety of standards within math. Most of it was related to matching and number identification, numerals. We did some identifying shapes. And then the teachers' rooms were labeled with either a room number, a color, a shape, or a name. And students could match or identify based on what their specific grade or need was. So for some of our students in fourth grade, they were matching and identifying the actual room number. And then for our K2 students, they were matching the colors or the shapes for the days of the week. So again, differentiating that prerequisite skill to get to that VSOL standard skill at the fourth grade level. The other piece that we talked about through this job was the science VSOL standard. So this science one that's listed is for kinetic and potential energy. So we use the cart and dragging the cart to kind of explore that more and apply it. So looking at going on ramps throughout the building, going over doorways, moving fast versus slow, what it was like when we pulled the cart versus pushing the cart, and that sort of variety. So underneath that are all the different applied studies, competencies and skills that we also addressed. And a lot of them are very similar, if not the same as the VSOL standards. But some of those other skills included recognizing peers and coworkers and supervisors by names, map skills using directionality vocabulary, looking at some community text. We had some signs and maps throughout the building, and then looking at the days of the week and following the personal schedule. Next. So these are some specific examples from what instruction and independent practice would look like within this career exploration phase. So the first picture that's kind of pink in the background is from a slideshow that we put together. And so they had a variety of peer modeled videos and text related to the specific job that they could click on and view. And then the way that we connected that to the VSOL standards, where they were answering questions about the passage that they read, they were identifying some specific details or events. We could do some beginning, middle, and end for nonfiction. And we could also do some sequencing of steps within the specific job. On the second picture, that would be their actual independent practice activities. So within the classroom, they would match some numbers. They could do days of the week, shapes and colors using clip cards. They would use a map and reference a list to find the different classrooms to practice within the classroom before they were doing that during their job. And those kind of all address those VSOL standards that we talked through in an instructional way to prepare them for this job that they were doing. Next. And this is the students actually doing their work. So again, thinking about those skills, this is their specific experience, and they were using those skills to make some meaningful connections. So in the first photo, that's the room number card that we had labeled. And so you can see they're labeled by color for our younger kids for days of the week. And then the student would actually pick up that card, as you'll see in the third photo, and check off as they went to each room and brought the cart back. So matching the room number that was on the card to the number that was posted in at the teacher's door. For this particular student, he had 3-digit number versus a 2-digit number because he had moved on to that skill as we kind of did this project. So using these kind of different pieces to really plan our instruction. Our kiddo in the middle was all about the science. He's one of our younger kiddos. And so that's the pulling the cart. You can see the cart is purple, so he is matching by color. And then really focusing on the skills in action. So connecting those standards as they're doing the skill so that we can get those higher post-secondary outcomes. as well as following a routine and greeting others in the building. So those communication skills that can be embedded. Next. So the second job we're going to look at is our cleaning specialist. So we specifically had a person who not only was using the vacuum to clean the carpets, but was kind of going in and doing some planning with the librarian as to when he was going to clean which carpet and what that looked like. So for this particular student, he was working on some communication skills. He was also working on that science VSOL and getting to that instruction and independent practice piece, as well as the reading VSOLs for looking at some of those texts. So we connected kinetic and potential energy, electricity. We also talked about sound with the level of the vacuum and when was a good time to go vacuum and what that looked like. For the applied studies connection, we looked at some sequencing of events, recognizing peers, directionality, and then the days of the week in a personal schedule. Next. So again, here's some just examples of that instruction and independent practice. For the first picture, that's what our slides for the text and the peer modeled videos looked like. And so again, addressing that sequencing piece, that identifying an event or a step in a passage, identifying beginning, middle, and end of a passage, and those other reading VSOL standards. For the instructional piece on the right, it's the same type of skill. So that sequencing, that recognizing important events, and they were all differentiated based on what our students' skill level was, so that we could really hone in on what those particular needs were. Next. So this is an example of our student in action, and this is actually within their classroom where they were practicing this before they got to the library. So making those connections again to the sequencing, the energy, electricity, talking through sound, and then the rugs in the actual library were labeled by shapes and numbers, so that the students could again practice those VSOL skills as they were doing this application piece of their jobs. Next. So how does this connect to secondary? Because we've talked a lot about the elementary piece, and a lot of these elementary prerequisite skills boost what it looks like once we get to secondary. So thinking about our jobs at the elementary and secondary level, some of those students could be doing the jobs that they've learned at elementary within their community once we get to middle school. So going to a public library and helping there to see how some of those might connect. We also did some connections with the competency skills and the VSOL standards, as well as seeing how those functional life skills would enhance that content instruction. So understanding the higher level and longer nonfiction text at the secondary level because they were able to build on their skills that they had made at that elementary level. And again, being able to tell time and elapsed time because they had definitely spent the time using and applying their skill of telling time at the elementary level. So on this slide, we've talked through some of the skills of the applied studies curriculum and how those could move along as well. So for career awareness, we moved from determining our jobs and preferences to really looking for a potential job to align with those skills and interests. Communication, moving from wants and needs to actually communicating a specific conversation skill. Employability, moving to attending to an activity to actually completing an activity. And then self-advocacy, so communicating a need and requesting what those accommodations are, and really having kids reflect on knowing what they specifically need themselves for us to help them. Next. Of course, when we're supporting our students with extensive support needs, we want to think about those high leverage practices that we put into place. So establishing your norms and routines. So for our kids doing this project, we had a very set schedule. They knew when they were doing the instruction in the classroom. They know when they were going to work. They had little job tags so that they knew that was part of their routine. They were going there at that time of day. Teaching those social skills and behaviors. So what does that look like? Using those peer modeling videos, collaborating with all the relevant stakeholders. So we really, really invested our related service personnel, our parents, our teachers within the building, admin, and the students were a big piece of this to really make sure we were hitting all of those instructional pieces. We also made sure we were doing some progress monitoring and some reflection to really see, is this working? What's not working? What do we need to change? And of course, those evidence-based practices that we use without even thinking most of the time. So a lot of those you kind of saw in the examples, the visual supports, the modeling, us prompting, embedding those communication opportunities as we're going through the different activities. Next. So on this page is just some examples from our career exploration. The first one is from our preference assessment. So prior to really determining the jobs that we were going to use to embed this instruction, we wanted to know what our kids were interested in, because the more they're interested, the better level of engagement we're going to get. So we used those areas and did a preference assessment, and then determined how we could take those interests and preferences and connect the VSOL standards into jobs that they would engage in. The second picture in the middle is just a task analysis. So breaking down the specific steps within that morning book delivery person. And these were actually differentiated per student based on their specific needs, because we had some students who had some gaps in one area, but not in others. And so we really, really individualized them to what that specific need was for that student. And we use them not only to help track where the student was independent at, but also where we needed to embed some more instruction. And it gave us also an opportunity to talk to the student about what they thought they were doing well versus what the other person who was working with them was seeing. In the third picture, this is just how we stored the independent work tasks within the classroom for one of our classrooms. So providing as many opportunities for independence as we could. You can see all the bags are labeled with that specific job skill. And then they had a specific schedule that they would follow with visuals to kind of embed into the classroom routine and keep them moving and doing some things independently, as well as getting that instruction they needed. Next. And again, just some more examples. So at the top is a reflection that the students were able to do. So we had our students do them, as well as our what we would call our job coaches, which were really our teachers, our IAs, and the librarian, so that we could really see, one, what we were seeing the students doing, but two, what they were seeing. So it kind of helped that reflection process as well as that planning. So we had a particular example for a student who was able to do the number 0 to 20 matching independently. When we got to 20 to 40, he became really frustrated and overwhelmed. And so this kind of opened up an opportunity for us to talk to him and ask his opinion, or ask what he thought was frustrating. And it turned out that having 20 brand new numbers was a lot for him. So we made a plan, all of us together, to do 10 through 30 instead, so that he had some numbers he really was comfortable with and some not so much, so he could still be successful while he was learning. But those conversations would not have happened had we not had this piece of reflection from all of us to kind of use and talk through. Underneath that reflection is just an example of one of the schedules. So the visual schedules that students use to kind of follow as they were going through exploring each of their jobs and what that looked like in the classroom. And then just that end of year reflection. So we used all of this, these reflections and all of these pieces for the students to have in their career exploration portfolio for that kindergarten through 5th grade level, so that by the time they move to middle school, their portfolio can go with them and they can really hone more in on what that next level of career exploration or job skills training looks like. Next. So big takeaways. The Applied Studies Curriculum Map was a really, really nice resource to support us closing the skill gaps for post-secondary success and really boosting our VSOL instruction. So we could focus on those VSOL skills and standards where the kids had those gaps. We really, really focused on planning with the end in mind. So knowing we wanted to boost our post-secondary outcomes and thinking about how we could get there as we were using all of these instructional pieces. And then again, that big collaboration, it takes a village, as we say. So bringing in all the stakeholders, the parents, the staff, the students themselves, related service providers, and any other supports that could really boost this instruction and what it looked like. And then our really big takeaway was how much of the VSOL instruction they actually had boosted based on the application. So their success in learning those skills really was impacted by being able to apply it in a meaningful way. Next. And so that was it for Richmond City. We really saw some beautiful connections, and we're excited to see how this kind of progresses as we're continuing. So this is my contact information if you have any further questions.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for all of that good information of how we can apply the Applied Studies Curriculum Map with our VSOL instruction and making those connections. Really appreciate it. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Amanda Atkinson, who is from Nottoway County Public Schools, and she's the coordinator of special education. So at this time, Amanda Atkinson, take it away.
Yes, ma'am. Next slide, please. So in Nottoway County, what we do, we work alongside with our general education and our special education teachers. So we have formed and use a lot of cross-curricular lessons and lesson planning. The example that we have up here today, the book is called Winter Fun on a Sled, and we'll kind of guide the next couple of slides will be examples from the book. But we use this to help the students access the material, the VSOL material, and help them to relate these skills as close to life skills as we can so that they'll have a meaningful learning experience. So with this particular book, we have had math, reading, and science lessons all based from this book. Next slide, please. So if we're looking at this lesson, so it would start off, the teacher would read the entire story to the group. Then a PowerPoint was created. So once the PowerPoint has been created, the teacher will then include the information she is trying to get from the VSOLs. But for this particular one, so who was the first animal on the sled? So the students would look at the examples and they would use the information that was presented through the reading in order to be able to answer that question. Then the next question would be what happened next in the story. So we could base those off of the reading VSOLs and the math VSOLs, and both of those are located on the slide. Next. So still walking through the lesson. So then you could use information based off the setting and give a description as they're going through the story. So you can use this information to help the students pull out more information. So if they're looking at the various pictures at the bottom, some of them they would know, like the beach scene, they would automatically know that this is not part of the story just by looking at the title of the story. So based off of these, so they would choose which one that they feel would be the setting of the story. Next. So now continuing to walk through the lesson. So counting activities can be used through the book. So how many animals are on the sled? So that could be based off of the math VSOLs. Then the teacher could actually say, well, if 4 jumped off, how many are left on the sled? So they could do interactive slides, or they could actually use different counters or different pieces to bring the math piece come to life from the book. Next slide. So some more questions. What type of animals are on the sled? So the teacher could have the students name all the animals on the sled. Then she could also bring the science piece in. So can these animals stay in the cold? So what are their characteristics and what environments do these animals thrive in? So then there we've added that science piece into here. So using the information, you can take a story and turn it into real world examples that the children can actually see and relate it back to different things that they may have already gone through. So then they can really understand why the teacher is teaching the skill that they are teaching. So they could have, like for an example, could an alligator survive in the snow? So why or why not? So all of these lessons could be tied back into the reading, science, and math portion. Next slide. So here's a list of some cross-curricular books that we have come up with that could be used across multiple grades. So Little Leaders, Bold Women in Black History. So you could do the history piece. You could also include that in math, science, reading. So you could include it in everything. And of course, history. So the next one is the Cookie Fiasco. That would be reading and math particularly. Here We Are by Oliver Jeffries. So that also could be included in reading, math, and science. Stick Man, that's more for reading and math. Echo, The Book Thief, Henry's Freedom Box, a true story from the Underground Railroad. You could associate that reading, math, science, and history. The Greats of Math, of course, reading and math. You Can't Buy a Dinosaur with a Dime. That one could be reading and math also. And We Are Water Protectors. So there's one for reading and science. So you could take all of these books and come up with multiple lessons through multiple subject areas just to get whatever you're teaching to try to bring that cross-curricular effect into the classroom. Next slide. So here are some modified worksheets. At Nottoway, we work a lot with the general education room and the special education VAP classrooms in order to make sure that everybody is on the same pacing. For example, so here's an example of a modified worksheet. So each classroom, you have the VAP classroom and the general education classroom. We're asked to calculate the perimeter. The particular VSOL we were looking at is of triangles, squares, rectangles, and pentagons. So if you look at the VAP classroom, that worksheet is more in detailed. It has an example up there just so as you're introducing the lesson so the children can see what is being presented by the teacher so they can understand what they're actually looking for, and it gives detailed examples. And it's telling them work out the perimeter of the rectangle so they can see all of the sides. They understand what to do. Then if we were in the general education classroom, they would have the same worksheet, but yet the instructions are not as in detailed as the first. And then you don't have as many details, like all of your sides are not laid out, but you could use these to better help. So you still are getting that general education piece, but it's modified for the VAP classroom. Next slide. So here's another example. You have the VAP classroom and the general education classroom. So for the VSOL, 5.14 tell time and measure elapsed time in whole and half hour increments. So if we're looking at the VAP classroom, that gives us our example of the elapsed time and how it would work. So it gives you the number line and you can go across and actually measure it with your finger. So then it also asks the same questions as the general education classroom, but then again, the VAP has more depth to the sheet. So they can see the examples, they can see how it's worked out as the teacher is presenting it. Whereas if you were in the general education classroom, they could perhaps draw examples on their sheet, draw their own in order to figure out how much time passes between the two. Next slide. Another program that we have also utilized is called the Classroom Economy. Now, the classroom economy teaches us a lot of different skills, but it's based off of just like a working day of a parent or guardian. So it's designed to tell us and help us to learn the financial literacy and responsibility, and it can go across multiple grade levels. In the intermediate school at Nottoway, there's 5th and 6th grades. So it was introduced there. So what we do is we use real world scenarios to see how they can save, how they can spend money and budget. So, and as the grade level increases, the difficulty level increases. So for example, the students will learn, I have a job, whether it is passing out papers, running papers to the office, they'll get specific jobs. So then with their job, they learn that they have money. So they'll either have rent for their desk or they could purchase their desk. So they're learning that they have to budget their money in order to pay for their monthly expenses. So, and as you increase grade level, of course, the rigor increases. So like for middle school, you could pay for your desk rent, plus you would have an added utility bill for the room that you're in. And then high school, you could get purchasing insurance. So the complexity builds as the grade levels increase. So everything in the classroom economy can be customized to meet your particular classroom and the abilities of your students. So it helps a lot with money, time management, just teaching them how to use basic math computation. It could even teach them how to balance a checkbook, just depending on how you set your program up. It's cross-curricular also, so it would talk with or go through the skills of reading, math, and uses vocabulary pieces. So this is a valuable tool when you are trying to introduce the kids to different math activities, just giving them those real world examples in a more tangible form. Next slide. So the different VSOLs that you could work with when using the classroom economy. So you're dealing with money. So the money that they make each week by doing whatever job that they have. So these are just a few examples. There's more, but the ones that we chose for today, so you could match and count coins through 25 cents. You could identify the location of decimals. So when you're talking about the whole numbers and then the decimal numbers, so if you're using dollars and cents, then you could use the place value to identify the numbers. So there again, if you're teaching them how to balance that checkbook, because that decimal point can really make a difference. So you're still, the next one you're using currency. So you're building them up. Identify details, an idea or event or information in a nonfiction text. So they're using the skills that they make or the skills that they are building from the classroom economy through real world events or different information. So how to balance a checkbook, what bills you may need, what's coming up per se for the month. Then again, tell time and measure the elapsed time. So you have to be at one time to work. You have a set start time, a set ending time. And then again, the currency piece. So it would just be getting your bills, balancing your checkbook, and knowing how many hours you have to work a month in order to make it all work so that you don't run out of money. Next slide.
Thank you, Amanda. Now we'll have Lauren Moreno, who's also a special education teacher and the department chair at Nottoway High School. Lauren?
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and start. All right, so here at the high school, we work in collaboration as much as possible with the general education teachers. We get together and plan lessons so that the whole department kind of knows, and we kind of stay on, even though we're doing VSOLs for math, we kind of follow along with the algebra. In science, we follow along with the biology more so. We discuss the SOL versus the VSOL and kind of pull apart what activities can be done together. This gives teachers the opportunity to learn various strategies that the gen ed teacher may be able to use to help accommodate students with disabilities in their co-teaching classroom, as well as strategies that we can use in the self-contained classroom. Share ideas of what has worked and what has not worked, differentiate plans, worksheets, and projects, and we can modify plans to hit the VSOLs, but kind of go a little beyond as well. And collaboration can benefit all students. Next slide. Some of the collaboration we do with the biology class is in the spring. There's kind of like a garden in the middle of the complex up here. So our students go in with the biology students and recognize that plants need the light, air, and water to grow and create energy through photosynthesis, which is the VSOL SHS.2. And we go out and plant in the garden in the spring with the environmental science and biology classes. And then we also participate in the Owl Pellet Lab, which focuses on the VSOL SHS.9. The student will recognize ways in which living organisms interact with other living and non-living parts of environments and ecosystems, and how interactions might change under different conditions. So they kind of enjoy dissecting the owl pellets, and then we kind of put the bones together to kind of see what that owl has eaten, and they enjoy that. Next slide. I have students who work with the librarian, as well as she comes into our classrooms and provides lessons after reading stories or short passages. It goes on as part of a job skill when they go in there and shelf books, and then she comes in and works with us as part of the reading VSOL. And then algebra students, on the next slide, it'll talk about a sales cart we do, and some of the students that are responsible in the algebra and math classes come down and help. So it's more student-led than adult-led. Next slide. For job skills that hit also on math VSOLs, we have a rolling snack / gift cards that's just for the teachers. We do secret pals here, and a lot of times, teachers want to come in and grab something. So the students are in charge of operating it. They are responsible for taking inventory, restocking, and selling. They have scheduled time and days that they run the store and a scheduled location so teachers know where to come. Even though they don't charge sales tax, they still have to add up the total cost of items. And when we restock, they do have to factor in sales price or sales tax to be able to repurchase items that we get doing the profit. And this kind of helps with job skills. It helps with tangible real world skills, and they seem to enjoy all of it. Next slide. And this is our contact information if anybody has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Amanda, for your information and working collaboratively with general education teachers and also modifying, classroom instruction to meet the needs. So we appreciate you and all that you do. Next, we are going to have Elizabeth Mall, who is from Virginia Beach City Public Schools. And we're going to allow her to talk with you about some instructional practices that they do in Virginia Beach. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Leah. So my name is Beth Mall, and I am with Virginia Beach City Public Schools. My current classroom is participating in virtual instruction. So a lot of the materials that you'll see me present today are designed for presenting virtually. Next slide, please. Okay, so for me, the biggest component of working with our students is establishing communication. And I like to use the Communication Bill of Rights towards the beginning of the year to explain to the students what my expectations for communication are and what their rights are for what they can expect from me. If we can click on the link to show the visual for it. This particular visual has excellent student-friendly language and illustrations. It, of course, is not cooperating with us right now, so I'll go ahead and talk about some of the examples. So, being able to ask for what you want, who you want, where you want to go, what you want to do, to be an active member in your community, to be informed about the people who work with you, to say how you feel and what you like, the right to refuse or protest, to give and be told information that matters to me, such as changes in my day or schedule, to always have access to working AAC or AT, to make choices from meaningful options, to access communication tools and strategies, to be talked to in a way that I can understand, and to be talked to, not about. So once we establish those expectations for communication, then we are ready to dive in and figure out what the individual communication system is. Next slide, please. So establishing the communication, a lot of us rely on using visuals. So if you click on the link for Project Core, you're able to download some free visuals that go with the core words. Here you can see my core board that I use. And I've got it set up so that my pieces are removable and I can bring them over and set them onto different communication formats. Let's go to the next slide to take a look at one of those. So I like to use a communication book, and I set it up so that students can respond with colored response cards. And I do that again from our virtual students. So we're setting those instructional routines on how the questions are presented or interaction opportunities. And I've got those items printed in a book for me to easily flip through, or slides that I can put up on the screen. And that gives us a template for structured language opportunities and partner-assisted scanning. So if you would like to set up something like this for in your classroom, check with your speech and language pathologist or your assistive technology specialist, and they can help you create a page set that goes with your instructional practices. And that way you have different functions of communication ready to go for the students, whether they're answering questions, directing activities, asking questions, or commenting on an activity. Next slide, please. And so these are the templates that I use. In the top left corner, you'll see that there's a field of 2, a field of 3, a field of 4, field of 5, field of 6, and then there's a high contrast example. So again, I can take these cards and move them. I could set up a field of 3 very easily by just having my core board nearby and my structured language template. Then I can present those options, have those visuals ready. Using the response cards allows multiple students to engage in an activity at the same time. I know that there's a lot of research about offering extended wait time. Again, I'm presenting virtually, so when I ask my questions, I'm asking to the entire group all at once, and they all respond in their own way at their own time. They're not usually seeing each other or copying answers that way, so I don't have to do the wait time before asking for responses. But in the classroom, remember to do the 3, 2, 1, then share. Okay, if we can go to the next slide, please. Explicit language instruction. So again, I love core vocabulary and integrating it into my instruction. If you would like a starting point, check out the AAC Language Lab, A Year of Words. That's a full year of instructional activities and materials that support core word instruction. In addition, you can find a variety of books and lesson plans ready to go, all free on the Toby Dynavox site. So I like to combine those together and do a lesson throughout the week on 1 word per week. That's my strategy. Next slide, please. And facilitating academic conversations. So I showed you my colored response cards, and this is one way that I work on getting the buy-in. I ask them how they would like to learn about a topic. Would you prefer to play a song or video? Do you want to read a book? Or should we do an activity? So I can use this as the hook or introduction for an activity and kind of get them to tell me which way they want to go. All of the activities would be aligned to the same VSOLs, and it just gives us some choices. Next slide, please. Facilitating collaboration. So for this, I was thinking more student-to-student communication. And so if we've got the choice board for the learning targets where they're letting me know what their preference for the learning is, then I can tally that and go with the highest vote. That gives everybody the time to respond. And then during that time, you'll have students that respond quicker or require more assistance. And so you may need to use a first then board to support on-task behavior for some of those students while everybody has an opportunity to respond. That allows for learning about wait time, turn taking, voting, coming to a consensus, and disagreeing respectfully. Next slide, please. Participation in group activities. So make sure that you're using a variety of engagement strategies and response formats. I know I just said consistency across that, but you may want to include, excuse me, the consistent questioning format reduces the cognitive demand. So if they're familiar with the field of 2 or field of 3, they can spend more time thinking about and working towards those academic standards than trying to figure out how to respond and how to communicate in that instructional activity. We use a lot of visuals and concrete objects. Layer the forms of scaffolding, whether you're using sensory, interactive, or graphic scaffolding. So sensory, you might have scents or something that can be tasted, different textures to touch that will help build meaning for those different activities. And then you've got the ask, pause, process, and share to give extended wait time, making sure that everybody has an opportunity. And you can also use gesture quick checks like thumbs up, thumbs down, a nod or a shake, smiling and frowning. There are lots of different ways to access that communication. Next slide, please. At my school, we have a life skills classroom. And in that room, we've got a kitchen, a bedroom area, and a bathroom. So for that room, we go in and we teach a lot of different types of lessons, including kitchen safety, using assistive technology to communicate, everything regarding money, whether it's earning, saving, or spending, budgeting and shopping, following directions for a recipe, using assistive technology with appliances. You can see an example there. There's a switch hooked up to the blender. We want to work on maintaining a shared space, sort, wash, dry, fold, and put away laundry, and developing routines for some leisure activities as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so when I take my class to the Life Skills Kitchen, we have a 2.5-hour block. During that time, I try and work on an activity for each of the content areas. So I'm going to show you a couple of the different things that I adapted for tying that all together for that chunk of instruction. These materials are provided by the FDIC in the Money Smart for Young People financial education program. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to the different materials that are available for you to use. Next slide, please. So the first component, I decided to go with counting coins. So I chose lesson number 1. It says, through exploration of children's literature, story problems, and hands-on activities, including identifying, sorting, and counting coins, students begin to develop connections between the literal product of coins and bills and the abstract concepts of using money to make purchases. So I thought about what VSOLs connect with that particular lesson plan. So we can look into measurement and geometry, number and number sense, and into algebra for some of those different skills. Next slide, please. If we go back to the curriculum map and take a look at these different levels, these are examples of how this lesson plan might progress along the way. Discriminating the values of the commonly used coins, finding sums, counting and recording, and finding a total. So all of that is important when you're creating your shopping list and doing the shopping, then following to make the recipes. Next, please. So this was from the Money Smart program, and I adapted it with some color-coded response boxes there, and that lets me use this same visual for multiple questions. Can you find the penny? And then you would choose from your color cards. Oh, there's the penny. Next, please. So for here, we're looking at matching and counting coins through 25 cents. And the question is, which coin matches the value on the price tag? And the banana has a price tag of 25 cents. So depending on your students, you may or may not want to provide the field of 3 response options. I do, again, because my students are virtual and it gives us a starting point for those conversations. But it may be something that your students are able to verbalize or point to the coin. You've got lots of options on how to work through that. Next, please. And then again, I can use a variety of coins to count the value through 50 cents. So we've got a collection of coins and we're determining the value. Next, please. For this one, we're going up to the 5th grade standard, and we're using currency for problems up to $1. So we've got bananas are 25 cents each. The recipe calls for 3 bananas. How much will it cost to buy them? Next, please. All right, so that was the introduction for coins. Then I'm combining 2 different lesson plans from the Money Smart program. This one is the Make a Plan, where learners put their financial skills to the test in the module as they travel through a simulation on creating a budget. The module explores fundamental elements of creating a plan for how students spend their money and reach their savings goals. In addition, the module provides real-world scenarios for students to apply budgeting principles. So with this, I highlighted where we can pull in some of those reading VSOLs for understanding the meaning of words and passages, answering questions about fiction or nonfiction, and those standards are applicable across grade levels. Next, please. and back to the curriculum map to show how that progresses across the different levels, starting with identifying the facts, then answering questions, making connections, answering more specific questions, and connecting with real life experiences. Next, please. So I took the slide from the Money Smart program, and it had a great visual with the definition there, spending limits, the amount of money a person can spend. And so I'm asking for the students to recognize what a spending limit is, and then apply that to a situation. So your spending limit for the recipe is $5. Which ingredient can you afford? And looking at the different options to confirm. Next, please. All right, so kitchen safety is one of the important things for us. We need to establish those expectations for participation in our life skills classroom. In our district, we use PBIS. And so we've got our PBIS classroom matrices based on the life skills kitchen and then community-based instruction. So you'll notice that there are different expectations for those scenarios. And our school rules are to be safe, responsible, and respectful. So we're showing the different ways that we can do that in those different environments. Next, please. Preparing to go shopping. Now, this is kind of hectic for most teachers, trying to figure out how to pull all of the pieces together. You got to choose your recipe and then determine which supplies to purchase after you check your classroom inventory. You need to have time to discuss exchanging money for goods, setting the budget and creating the shopping list, using those structured language exchanges and vocabulary for shopping in a grocery store. Practice the process for checking out at the register and introducing the grocery store employees and the vocabulary needed to interact with them, using a virtual tour of the grocery store to prepare for going on a community-based instruction trip, and simulating making purchases. Next, please. When we're getting ready to do community-based instruction, it's important to explore different areas of the grocery store, talk about how items are grouped, use those common signs to find items. There's a lot of functional literacy there. And this is just an example of how I might set up questions for this type of activities. So I've got a picture of the bread and bakery aisle. And for our shopping list, we've got bread, banana slices, raisins, sugar, cinnamon, chocolate spread, and gummy bears. And I'm asking the students, can we find an item from our list in this area? And so they need to make the connections with the bread is on the shopping list to, yes, this is the bread aisle. This is where we can find what we need. Next, please. All right, then you work through the budget. You can use a calculator to check the total before going to the register. So there's all kinds of skills involved with teaching students how to use the calculator, determining if the total is greater than or less than the budgeted amount, and then making adjustments as necessary, and then keeping the receipt to track purchases. Next, please. And here's my contact information. Please do stay connected.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Appreciate all of the information that you've given, and we hope that what you have heard today from our teachers in Richmond and Nottoway and Virginia Beach will be able to be beneficial to you in terms of adding some of these practices into your own instruction for this population for students. At this time, we're going to go through about 2 frequently asked questions that we get most often. And question 1 is, my students' IEPs include more functional life skills goals than academic goals. What is an effective way to address both types of goals? And our response is here that the functional life skills and academics are not separate spheres. They actually build upon and support each other. For an example, a community-based activity like eating in a restaurant can include academic skills such as reading the menu, computation skills regarding the cost of menu items, identifying opening and closing times, as well as functional skills such as hand washing, eating, and making choices. These skills tie directly to the applied studies curriculum map and address the domains of language arts, math, and independent living and the competencies represented. So we always want to make sure that we include functional skills into our instructions to help our students transition into those life skills as smoothly as possible. Question number 2. I have several students that are just learning to make the choice between 2 options. What are some strategies I can use to introduce 3 options? So our response here is that gradually you can introduce the 3rd option by making 2 of the 3 options the same. This allows the student to be familiar with seeing 3 choices, even though 2 are the same. Additionally, after the student becomes familiar with 3 choices, replace one of the choices that is the same with one that is different, and continue to present the student with 3 choices across as many activities as possible. And this may be beneficial, particularly when it comes time to actually take the VAP assessment, because those answer options come in 3 answer choices. And so we often get the question of how we can get your students to be able to select among 3 options. And this could be a good strategy in terms of introducing 3 options to your students. So this is all that we have for our instructional practice webinar. If you have any questions, you can always contact the Office of Student Assessment. Our phone number is here on the screen at 804-225-2102, or you can email us at the email address on your screen as well, which is student_assessment@doe.virginia.gov. We hope that this webinar has been beneficial to you and that you will be able to gauge some of these practices. Feel free to contact these teachers in these school divisions if you have any questions or you feel you want to share any other instructional practices that you may have to help benefit students with cognitive disabilities. Thank you.